Why does Russia fear Ukraine joining NATO so much? NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is the only effective security organization in Europe. At a time when the Russian Federation is occupying Ukraine and Russian political leaders are denying our right to govern our higher self, joining NATO is essential to preserving Ukraine's independence and territorial integrity. NATO was created in 1949 at the height of the Cold War, in response to the establishment of pro-Soviet puppet governments in Eastern Europe. In fact, it was intended to protect post-war European democracy from Stalinist expansion. The group later included Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, the United Kingdom and the United States. As of 2022, NATO has 30 countries. NATO is a defense organization that protects its members against foreign aggression. Article 5 of the Washington Treaty lays down the concept of collective defense, which is important in this respect. An attack on a member state is considered an attack on all member states. As a result, the threat of force against NATO members is greatly reduced. No one wants to join forces with 30 countries at once. For decades, Ukraine has not set itself a goal of joining NATO. While Presidents Kravchuk and Kukma were in power, the idea of multiple vectors was supported by security through the 1994 Budapest Accord, which also included recognition of Russia. However, Russia's conflict in Transnistria, Abkhazia and South Ossetia has increased Ukraine's need to take preventive measures so that it is not alone against Russia. In April 2008, Ukraine and Georgia had the opportunity to join NATO at a meeting held in Bucharest. Although U.S. President George W. Under President Bush, the decision to apply for membership was blocked by Germany and France, especially under pressure from the Russian Federation. For months after the meeting, Russia launched an attack on Georgia. 6 years later, Russia occupied Ukraine's Crimea and Donbass. It is clear that the Russian Federation is ready to kill only people in self-defense. This is the essence of Putin's guarantee of security for Ukraine, NATO, and the United States. Respect Russia by leaving Eastern Europe to its fate. Although the Russian Ministry of Defense promised not to kill or target civilians, about 2,000 innocent Ukrainians were killed by Russian guns and bombs. Hundreds of thousands of people had to flee their homes for safety and survival. Russian forces killed people, destroyed kindergartens and schools, and set fire to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Kharkov, Mariupol, and Chernihiv. But war can be avoided if Russia suddenly threatens not only Ukraine, but all participating organizations. Currently, Ukraine's accession to NATO enjoys the support of the majority of the country's population. According to the poll conducted by the poll group on March 1, 76% of Ukrainians support the decision. This is the highest figure since Ukraine gained independence in 1991. Also, Russia's aggression opens the eyes of Europe, which means that the door is open for Ukraine and other countries to join the coalition. Missing the historic opportunity to join NATO is a crime for millions of Ukrainians fighting for independence from Russia's big brother. For Ukraine, joining NATO is a good idea not only to guarantee national security, but also to maintain democracy. The war between Ukraine and Russia lasted 11 days. Vladimir Putin ordered an attack on the creative centers of Russia's neighbors in order to disarm and denazify Ukraine. While the Ukrainian army announced the death toll after its attacks on the major cities of the country, the city of Kyiv has now been evacuated due to the attacks of the Russian forces on the city. At the same time, the airport in the region was closed. The truth is that the conflict between Ukraine and Russia has been going on for a long time, and NATO is in the middle of it. The Russian president has long opposed the group, which he sees as a threat to his security. So why is Russia going so far to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO? Why does Putin not want Ukraine to join NATO? NATO was created in 1949 to prevent the Soviet spread to other European countries. The organization initially consisted of 12 countries, the most important of which were the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom and France. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. At the time, Russia claimed that the United States had promised President Gorbachev that NATO would not move eastward. Some countries joined NATO instead, such as the Baltic republics, Poland, Romania, and Lithuania. Currently, there are 30 countries in the organization. As a result, Russia feels threatened by NATO's eastward expansion, especially worried that Ukraine, a country that might intervene, will eventually join NATO, and that this has not happened yet. In this way, Putin wants to avoid the eventual fall of Ukraine under Western power at all costs. Note that Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe, has access to the Black Sea, and its borders are connected to Russia in the east. Russia invades Crimea. The Crimean Peninsula is located in the north of the Black Sea. He went to Russia during the Soviet era, but was transferred to Ukraine in 1954. Since Crimea was seen as a good place by Russia when the two countries gained independence, it started to enter the peninsula in 2014 and managed to become a closed area. At that time, in an effort to divide the country, an uprising also broke out in the Donbass region, and the West responded by sending troops to the Eastern European country, which led to an uprising of tension in Moscow and calls for the army to withdraw. These countries. Similarly, Russia has warned NATO not to recognize Ukraine, as well as other neighbors such as Georgia and Moldova. For the last 3 months, NATO-Russia talks in the context of Ukraine's possible NATO membership have been at the center of the world's main political agenda. As the level of discussion increases, the new content of the topic in the discussion becomes more and more. Most important is an understanding of NATO's current role in international politics. Each participant's position is essentially self-explanatory. In fact, after the United States won the Cold War, complex issues of the military and political party were also brought up, but the trend changed to meet the turf to allow the Union to be stable and stable. Make sure. A decade later, following 9/11 and subsequent military action in the Middle East, Russia's ambitions are growing not only in wars with its neighbors but also in forging quasi-alliances with itself. Frankly, it's not right to give away the prizes of 50 years of competition even to promote free elections, popular democracy, national security, freedom, etc. Such a departure from our values and principles would mean the West's semi-submission, and we are glad that it did not happen as Europe and America reaffirmed their place in the world. Therefore, NATO is no longer a defense alliance, cooperation is no longer the borderline of violation, and the process of European politics, on which side of the Ukrainian conflict, remains intact. No one should be fooled. The surrender of Ukraine to the Russian sphere of power will condemn all of Eastern Europe to hybrid attacks, and the Baltic states will be annexed. Poland is a conflicted rival of Russia and is ready to decide against all attempts by Russia to undermine stability and security, so there will be no delay. In this context, Putin meaningfully proposed to the Russian Federation the red line marked by NATO's eastward expansion. The West sees NATO as a military and political organization and has strict rules and regulations for those who join. The organization is open to independent cooperation, providing a window of opportunity to the international community. None of the member states see NATO as an aggressor, expansionist, or violator of human rights, and the Kremlin's position is otherwise. Vladimir Putin first took the Soviet idea of the Union as a counterattack aimed at destroying the Soviet Union, and is now trying to do the same with Russia. This is the position of the Russian Federation. With the peaceful transition of East Germany and Eastern Europe to the free world, Putin stripped of his position as a KGB officer and removed his image on a world scale from the original model. Announcing and allowing the disappearance of an uncertain future has created an illusion in Russia that is crumbling before our eyes. Even in the context of a hypothetical nuclear conflict and taking into account the depth of defense and the number of nuclear warheads flying to Moscow, the alliance does not pose a military threat to Russia. In the 21st century, when nuclear strike spray systems and hypersonic weapons are more mobile and versatile than nuclear weapons, physical distance will not be an issue. A direct military confrontation between NATO and Russia is almost impossible, especially at the moment. This is not the case. A post-Soviet state that joined the Union would forever remain from Russia, imposed Russia's world values and created a single traditional Slavic identity. Refusing to accept the options of Central and Eastern Europe and the Baltic states, the Kremlin openly advocated disarmament until the Iron Curtain, which the Soviets, especially in Germany and later, called the anti-fascist defensive wall. Attempts to veto or block the participation of other post-Soviet states, mainly Ukraine and the Eastern Partnership trio, show a hidden but widespread fear. It is not the fear of defeat or humiliation that governs Moscow, but the fear of not being elected, of being given freedom. As in the past, Russians are afraid of Western music, and today because it distracts people from the attraction of culture, and in th.